Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are going to be looking at how to build a Hollywood or a TV style flat. For this project we're going to have an 8-foot piece of 1x6 and essentially a 2-foot by 4-foot piece of Luan. You're also going to be provided with a drawing that shows you what we're going to be building today. So if you made it through the box project, you're going to find that this is very similar in the steps. First step is that we have to cut all of the frame out, then we need to assemble the frame, and then we need to add the lid. The first step that we need to do is determine what we're going to be cutting, what we're going to be cutting our 1x6 down to. We can turn our 1x6 into 1x3s right away, or we can wait, do all of our cross cuts, and then turn those cross cuts into 1x3s. I prefer to do my cross cuts first, and the reason that is as I make my cuts, I can do this. I've got 3 cuts according to my cut list. I've got one at 4 foot, one at 2 foot, and one at 1 foot 10 and a half, or whatever they actually are. But what I can do is do 1 cut, 2 cut, 3 cut, and then rip it down, and that takes less time than one long rip and then having to double the cuts on the miter saw. What's also nice is that when I make my cuts, I know that my 2 pieces that are supposed to be 2 feet or 4 feet or 1 foot 10 and a quarter or whatever it is, I know that those pieces are going to be identically the same if my saw is square, which it is. So the first thing that you're going to want to do on this project is lay out all your cuts, do your cross cuts, and then you can head over to the table saw and do some ripping. So let's go ahead and look at the layout for how we're going to cut this. So step 1 for completing our cut list is we need to find the cut list on the drawing. And it's pretty obvious because right here it says 1x3 cut list. We know that we currently have a 1x6. So for every piece of 1x6 we cut, we can get 2 1x3s. And you'll see that when we get to the table saw. But for right now, all I'm going to focus on is my cut list. When compiling cut lists, you always want to do your longest pieces to your shortest pieces. That way you might be able to find scrap pieces as you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at our first thing that we need to cut, which is 3 foot 10 and 3/16. So I'm going to pull my tape measure and then I'm going to stick right on the edge just a little bit so that you can see, and I'm going to line up and make my mark at 3 foot 10 and 3/16. It's kind of hard to see on this tape measure because it's pretty old. But there is my mark right at 3 foot 10 and 3/16. Then all I have to do is set, slide, and cut. Now before I go and cut this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to label the length of this board. So I know this is my off-cut side. So right here, I'm going to write 3 foot 10 and 3/16. But before I go and finish all of my cutting, I'm going to write it one more time here, 3 foot 10 and 3/16. Because eventually this is going to turn into 2 boards. And I'm just going to do it now, get it out of the way. All right, now that I've got my first piece marked and ready to cut, I've moved over to the miter saw and we're going to make that first cut. Then what I can do is either go back to my workstation, or if there's not a line behind me, I can do what I'm going to do and just measure and cut at the saw. The reason that we can't make all of our marks before we cut everything out is that we've got 3 sections, and so you can't measure from both sides without considering kerf, and that's just a lot of extra work that's just not worth the time. So now that I've got my first mark, I'm just going to line it up. And check that it is 3 foot 10 and 3/16. And that looks pretty spot on. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure and lay out my other 2 pieces, and then I can cut those also. Okay, I lied. I couldn't get a good camera shot, so I moved back over to the table to show you this. Now I'm going to go ahead and make my other 2 marks, and this is just like the box. We need 2 pieces out of this one board so I can measure from both sides for my offcut. So I'll do, looking at my cut list, I've got one at 1 foot 11 and a quarter, 1 foot 11 and a quarter, 1 foot 11 and a quarter, 1 foot 11 quarter. Then I'm going to come from the opposite side, 1 foot 9 and 3/4. 1 foot 9 3/4, foot 9 3/4. Now we can go back to the saw and finish up our cuts. Make sure you flip the board so that you're always cutting on the right side or correct side. Take your trash, throw it away. Check that you've got the right length. And I actually cut this one a little too long, which is okay. If you're going to make a mistake, always cut it a little too long and then you can shorten it down. Just make sure that when you're fixing it, you don't shorten it down too much because you can't stretch a board. And now it's perfect. Let's go to the table saw and finish this up. Now we're at the table saw, so let's go ahead and get it set and we'll make our rips. So just like before, we're gonna set it to 2.5 inches this time. Spot on, lock it down, make sure it's right. Check it again if you need to. Remember, it's 2.5 inches because we're turning this into 2 1x3s. Now when I go to cut this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stand back a little bit and I'm gonna push with my right hand and keep my left hand here to keep pressure against the fence. My left hand never moves. I just keep it here as kind of a feather board. Once my material is completely on the tabletop, I can switch to my push stick. Don't try to use your push stick all the way back here. It's gonna be more dangerous than it is safe. So let's just go ahead and see what happens as I cut through this. So I turn the saw on, let it come up to full speed, and I'm just going to put my hip right in line and push this right along with it. I'm just going to feed nice and straight through. Notice how my left hand isn't moving. Now that the material is all the way on the tabletop bench, my left hand holds it but doesn't push it. I grab my push stick and I clear the material. Without bothering to turn off the saw, I'm going to carefully grab my material and flip it. You always want the factory edge against the fence. And then just repeat the process. And then, if you had both of your pieces with you, like I should have, you can continue your rips. But let me go grab those and let's get the rest of these ripped. Thanks to the magic of cinema, we've moved, and also I changed the camera angle to give you guys a different perspective on this. I'm just gonna go ahead and not talk and cut this, but just watch how I keep the material against the fence and I flip it, okay? now we're back to our other camera view, the magic of video. The offcut, when you're done ripping, instead of throwing this away, we save these and they turn into paint sticks. It's recycling and it's amazing. So now we're ready to assemble. Basically, I'm just gonna take you through it and kind of walk. If you can't hear this, I'm just gonna dub over it later with audio and we'll see what happens. So the first thing that I want to do is take and make sure that I've got the correct staple length for my framing, which is 1.5" staples. Then I'm going to do a rough layout of my flat. So I know that I've got two pieces that are 9'4" 3/4, and I know I've got two that are 1'11" 1/4. And I'm going to go to my drawing and say, okay, 1'11" 1/4 are the rails, 1'9" 3/4 are the toggles. So you can either build inside or outside or in. Something this size doesn't really matter too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start, I'm going to just kind of work my way up. So we'll build the outside frame first, and all I'm going to do is focus on getting things flush. I don't care about square yet because the lid will square itself up. So I'll just go ahead. Being careful not to shoot my finger, right? Keeping your finger in a safe spot. So I shot right into a knot. I don't know if you saw that or not, but I flinched a little bit, and that's because I was shooting into some really hard wood. But my fingers were in a safe place so they didn't get shot. So then I'm just going to flip over, do this side now. I sure hope you can see this and I'm not covering it all with my body. All right, so now that I've got this, it's time to lay out my toggles. So I can see that both of these go 1 foot 4 inches from either side, and that's where this is going. So pull my tape measure, and I go 1 foot 4, and I know that that is on this side, 1 foot 4 on that side. Okay, then before I fasten anything, I need to make sure that these are square. And I don't have any reference lines to go off of. So I'm going to take my speed square, or you could use a combo square. Combo squares are actually better because you can adjust them so you don't have to pull this off the edge. But I'm just going to use this real quick. And this is just acting as a reference line. Now you can see, I don't know if you can see, but there's now a line that I can take, place my board directly on, so I have a nice little reference so that it's not overly this way or that way. Then I'm just going to go ahead and continue stapling. So I'm going to make sure that it's flush on the top. I'll put one staple in, and then make sure that it's square all the way down. Do the same thing on this one. Flush on top. Fingers out of the way. Square all the way down. come over to this side. And then in this situation, I'm going to just kind of push everything together to make sure it's where I want it. Nice and flush. Square all the way down. Nice and flush. Square all the way down. Now I'm ready to put the lid on. So you'll notice that I haven't once worried to check if this was square or not. And that's because I know that this step is what's going to square it up. And this is hands down the most important step when building your flat, is putting the Luan on. The Luan's what secures everything to where it's supposed to be. So what I'm going to do now is glue my frame and then just lay my Luan down. So now all I need to do is apply my glue. Before I do that, I'm going to make sure everything's ready. So I've got the correct length of staples and my staple gun. And I have my Luan sheet ready to grab, and I know what side's the good side. This is the good side, this is the bad side because of the X. So now, all I'm going to do is run my glue. Little pro tip, always do the glue on the opposite side before the closer side, because eventually you won't do that. Then you'll lean over your flat and get glue all over your shirt. That shirt will be ruined thanks to the dreaded glue belly. Glue belly has ruined many a shirts of mine. It's always a sad day when you have to retire a t-shirt. So that, oh, I did it. I didn't even listen to my own advice. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread this out, and I'm going to be careful not to get glue belly. And if you're going to err on too much glue, but this is definitely too much glue. If it's running off of the sides before you've even put your material on, probably have a little too much. But we can always wipe this off, make it look better. If you don't have enough glue, it's not going to hold as well. So, but this was definitely too much. Then you can just wipe that off your fingers. Then, this is where the magic happens. So I'm going to lay my piece of Luan on the flat as close as I can to square. And if you notice, I don't know if you can see this or not, but in this corner, both sides are perfectly flush, and up here, it's off by a solid 3/4 of an inch. And down here, it's off a little bit too, but that's okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just start on this corner, and I'm gonna make sure that this corner is perfect. So I take and I shoot one staple. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go all the way across the short side. Okay, so I take this short side and I do staples every 8 inches. That is about 8 inches. So I'm gonna go there, and then I'm gonna push and pull until it's flush. Staple, staple. Now it needs to go the other way. You probably can't see this. So then I'm just kind of pushing and pulling until it's where I want it. Now, this is where it's important. I go back to my original corner. And I'm going to take this corner and I'm going to go all the way up. I don't care about this end right away. All I'm doing is making sure that wherever I'm flush is where I'm shooting my staple. So my next staple is about 8 inches, and right here it's actually pretty good. So then I'm just going to shoot my staple, and as I work, I'm just going to kind of work the material. And make sure that everything is nice and flush as I'm going. So now that I've got that side done, I'm gonna go back to this corner and I'm just gonna kind of work my way up. So I'll flip this again. I know all the flipping is probably confusing, but now I'm just gonna work this side up, and this side is perfectly flush now because that side's flush and everything was cut correctly. So now I'm just every 8 inches. Doesn't have to be exactly 8 inches, you're just kind of eyeballing it. Okay, so now, before I do the rail, I'm going to do my 2 toggles. And to do my toggles, you can kind of eyeball it and guess, or you know where they are. They're on this side of 16, so I can just make a couple marks at every staple. If I know I need a staple here and here, I'm just going to put a mark at 16 and 16 and know that it goes on that side of them. And then I can go through finish my flat. If there's any glue, I want to clean that up. I've got this little pokey ouchie that I need to go grab a pair of butt nips and pull that out. But that's it. That's all there is. Last step, once everything's nice and cleaned up, I'm going to take on the flat, and on the back, I'm going to write my name. You never want to write your name or label the flat on the front because it's going to get painted and then you're not going to see it. Also, it's best to never use a Sharpie because inevitably Sharpies get written in the wrong place and you can't paint over Sharpie. So that's how to build a flat. Hopefully this helps, and I'll see you for the next one. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, I guess. That's what the YouTubers are saying.